Yeah, well, there's been essentially an important story that's been going on since the beginning of the crisis, but it's starting to hit ahead as some basic protections are expiring, but also because of some illicit activities of landlords. But we're facing and are going to see a much worse eviction crisis going on in the United States. Um, the CARES Act was supposed to protect people from evictions from evictions if their landlord benefited from federal subsidies, and all across the country. But I know specifically in Texas, it seems like a lot of landlords are just filing evictions against people regardless. So there was a piece in Texas Observer by Megan Kimball, which found that um, one, there was no real enforcement behind that provision in CARES, and now landlords are going forward pursuing evictions against people who have not been able to pay their rent since the crisis has started. So in Harris County, 10% of the evictions actually in Harris County were found to be in violation of the CARES Act. But still, they're just going forward, and people are going into court. They don't know their rights because there's been such a backlog of cases. Judges are essentially just rubber stamping things at the moment. And this isn't isolated to Texas. This is a fundamental problem across the country. People are relying on unemployment benefits. They're scraping by, but a lot of people are having to take care of family members who are unable to work. And now we're months away from the initial stimulus check, and many Americans are without money. And as the virus is especially flying through the state of Texas, people are seeing their sources of income dry up. And some cities have come forward with plans. Like Austin, for example, it has a plan. It's like your landlord has to alert you 60 days before, I believe, they can evict you. So it sort of gives you a little bit of grace period in between that time. But even still, then you're responsible to pay back all of this rent in the first place. So then you're in a situation where you owe $4,000 for the past few months. So there's a real crisis when it comes to housing, and specifically evictions, as landlords are now gearing up to start coming after people who have been unable to pay rent since the beginning of this crisis. They're using the court system. They're using the kind of fear and weakness of lower income people who don't really have access to strong lawyers to be able to defend them in these situations. And this is a nationwide problem. The Washington Post, citing the COVID eviction defense project, found that 20% of the 110 million of Americans who rent units are at risk of eviction by September 30th. And that's for a myriad of different reasons. But fundamentally, the fact that most people are unable to earn viable income during this time. So, this is not only just like a moral crisis, this is a fundamental capitalist crisis. So people are going to say the term housing crisis, and I'm not trying to be nitpicky here, but let's really talk about what that means. Did houses and apartments all over the country just become filled? Or did we see the housing stock just evaporate or disappear? No. What we are seeing is landlords who prey upon the labor of the vast majority of people in this country are finding it difficult to extract money from those people. So they're using the arms of the state, oftentimes illegally and illicitly, to try to corral and force those people into paying absurd amounts of money, including late fees, which is a whole other conversation. Which is a whole other conversation. So that's going on, and and the state basically is supporting them. So we don't have a housing crisis in this country. We have a capitalism crisis. We have a crisis that is going on and has been agitated because of coronavirus, but it's fundamentally a problem of the defense of private property, the defense of private property over the kind of very basic decisions of humanity that we should be making right now, which is we have houses, we have people who need to be housed, we need people not to be out in public right now, not working right now because we need to prevent this virus from happening. We need a national rent freeze. We need forgiveness on all of these evictions. We need forgiveness on back rent since the beginning of this crisis. There has been a complete failure on a state level. And now we're on a question as on a people level. Are we going to be able to stand up as a group of people, as I just said, 110 million of us, who are threatened by landlords against the system that's going to try to throw people on the street through to no fault of their own, because we are all going through this crisis together right now. And, we need to be prepared and fighting back because it's something that touches so many people. And it's so basic of a problem that we have the housing, we have the ability to house folks. And, our system is actually the problem. And it's the reason that there's a tension here.
I have nothing to add to that. and I'll just say I don't like to lean into this shit too much, but I know like what losing your house is like, and not knowing where a house is going to be, and the idea that we allow this to happen to anybody could not be more grotesque and disgusting. And the scale that we're about to hit, unless there's a serious intervention, people doing rent strikes, policy intervention, whatever, is totally fucked.
Yeah. And the source of the problem is property, though, too. So
it's just crazy how property feels confident to throw people out during a fucking pandemic.
We're just so used to it, too.
Right.
That's the problem. Is we're so used to this idea that that's an okay thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the default setting is fucked.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.